Today's daf is sponsored by Baruch Gold in memory of his mother Chana Bas Aaron Alevi, and we hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, your mother's neshama has an aliyah. All right, so today's daf is Kuf Yotes, and we will begin on Kuf Yotes. Good, it's helpful. So says the Gemara. So if you remember again, we actually left off yesterday. With in the middle of a pasuk. My lemachasa otik. So it's a Kuf Yotes. It's the last word on the second line. My lemachasa otik. What's the meaning of this phrase? We'll say the Gemara was quoting from a pasuk in Yeshayahu. What does it mean that he who goes ahead and literally covers that which is old? Zeh hamechasa dvarim shekisa otik yomin. This refers to a person who continues to go ahead and literally kisa means cover over the things of older days. Umaynihu and Mayninhu, what does this refer to? Sisrei Torah, the hidden sections of the Torah. I mean, I will say, again, there's an interesting idea. I'm not really going to get too much into it right now, but there are certain parts of the Torah that are not meant to be expounded. Because, again, of deeper esoteric meaning, because you're not easily understood, and perhaps more importantly, because they can be so easily misunderstood. So if you look at the Rashbam says Sisrei Torah, and the Rashbam writes, he says, Sisrei Torah, Ma'aseh HaMerkava. So this refers to Ma'aseh HaMerkava, which again is the episode that's described in Yechezkel, where ultimately, again, it's working, it's good, thank you. Where ultimately, again, we have this episode of the chariot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is a very esoteric episode. Ma'aseh Bereshis. Ma'aseh Bereshis is the creation account. That even in the creation story, the truth is, the story is not as simple as it seems. So the Navi praises those who go ahead and choose to keep those things that have been hidden throughout the ages to remain hidden. Others say, and others say no, that the Navi is praising the person who reveals things that were hidden in past days. What does this refer to? Ta'amei Torah. This refers to revealing the deeper hidden reasons of the Torah. Amar Rav Kana Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. So Rav Kana said the name Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. My dichsiv, what's the meaning of the pasuk? I will say again, more beautiful Gemara today. Lam Natseach Mizmor LeDavid. So I will say again, Lam Natseach literally translated means to the conductor, a song of David. Understand, David HaMelech wrote, very important Levium, you should have to pay good attention to this. David HaMelech wrote Sefer Tehillim as music. Sefer Tehillim is music. And he actually wrote it for the Levium to sing Shira. Not only that, but David HaMelech actually says in most of the Kapitlach what tunes to use and what instruments to use. It's absolutely amazing. So La Menatzeach means to the conductor of the Levitic choir. That spot is still open. So we're actually accepting applications here. So all right. So Lamnatzeach Mizmor LeDavid. So to the conductor. But here the Gemara has a beautiful different drasha about this. The Gemara says, what does it mean Lamnatzeach? Zamru lemishanotschin osom v'sameach. Literally sing to the one who you can defeat him and yet he's still happy. The hymn over here both says the Ribono Shalom. What does this mean? See how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so different than mortal man. How so? See, he says, Basar v'dam, menatzchin oso v'atzov. You know, when it comes to flesh and blood, if flesh and blood is locked in a conflict with someone and they lose, if I'm locked in a conflict and I lose, I'm sad. I'm sad that I lost. But God, when we defeat HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God is very happy. Shnei Emar, Vayomer lahashmideim, Lulei Moishe Bechira Amad Beperetz Lefanav. So here the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Tehillim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was ready to destroy the Jewish people. This is in the aftermath of the sin of the golden calf. God was ready to destroy them were it not that Moshe Rabbeinu stood in the breach before God. So what is David HaMelech extolling over here? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu was ready to go ahead and destroy Klal Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu stopped him. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so happy that he, so to speak, lost the battle. So therefore the Gemara dashes, Lam Natseach Mizmor LeDavid. So David HaMelech sang to the one, Lam Natseach, who had no problem being defeated. Lamnatzeach Netzach. So that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves. God loves nothing more than when we overcome him. Amar Rav Kahana Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. So Rav Kahana said to me, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Amar Reish Lakish, Amar Shimon Lakish, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Mai Dichsev. What's the meaning of the pasuk? Again, another beautiful Gemara. V'yidei Adam mitachas kanfeihem. So we'll say here, the Gemara is quoting from the pasuk from Yechezkel. Interestingly enough, this is actually Ma'aseh Merkava. This is actually part of the episode of the chariot that the Gemara said we don't study before. So the Navi says that literally these kruvim, there are different levels of angels in the celestial sphere, and Kruvim apparently are the ones that are closest to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Navi describes this vision of the Kruvim, and for the Kruvim, the hands of man, literally means the hands of man were coming out from underneath their wings. So the Kruvim have wings, and apparently again there were hands coming out of the wings, or beneath the wings. So the Gemara says, Yadoksiv. Interestingly enough, even though we read it Yidei, hands plural, it's actually written Yado singular. So whose hand does it refer to? Listen to how beautiful this is. Ze Yado Shela Kodesh Baruch Hu. This refers to the hands of God. They're the hand of God. Sheprusa Tachas Kanfei Hachayos Kedei Lekabel Ba'alei Tshuva Miyad Midas Hadin. This refers to the hands of God that extend beneath the wings of the chayos in order to go ahead and receive Ba'alei Tshuva and save them from the strict attribute of justice. So it's so absolutely beautiful. So apparently, again, Midas Hadin wants to seize people. The strict attribute of justice wants to judge people for their crimes, but yet the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaches down from his throne beneath the wings of the chayos to go ahead and grab onto any person who's really a true Baal Tshuva and save them ultimately from the Midas Hadin. Absolutely amazing. So both like you see the same motif over here. Lam natseach mizmor leDavid. And both I remember this because when you say Tehillim, it's such a profound yisod. Who is David HaMelech singing to? Lam natseach, to the one who has no problem being defeated. When defeat in that case means what? Salvation for the Jewish people. The hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu extend down beneath the wings of the Chayos. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to save us whenever possible. All we need to do is work a little bit to get in the right direction, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to to grab us, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there ultimately just to grab us up and to save us from justice. Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Kol kesef v'zav sheba olam Yosef likto. We'll say, good, this is good agadata for the upcoming parshiyos as well. So Rav Yehuda said, Shmuel, all the gold and silver in the world, Yosef collected it, v'hevi'u Mitzrayim, and he brought it to Egypt. So we'll say, it's obviously referring to when Yosef is viceroy in Egypt. Remember, there's massive famine. During the course of that famine, he was able to accumulate pretty much the world's wealth in Egypt. What happens? Shneimar, because the pasuk says, Vayilaket Yosef as kol hakesef hanimtza. Yosef collected all of the money that was found, all of the wealth that was found. Ainly Elys Shebe'eretz Mitzrayim. So I only know that Yosef collected all of the wealth in Egypt. Shebe'eretz Canaan, b'shar aratzos minayin. How do we know that Yosef also collected the wealth that was in Canaan and the wealth that was in all of the other lands as well? Talmud Lomar. V'chala aretz ba'u Mitzrayim, because the pasuk says, and the entire land came to Egypt. And I will say, when it says the entire land, so at least what it means is the entire area around Egypt, all of civilization around Egypt. The Gemara wants to suggest that it could have even been a greater famine that would have caused even far-flung places to come to Egypt. But the point is, how did Yosef go out and sell them wheat? They gave up their wealth. So as a result of the famine in Egypt housed the wealth of the world, or some good part of civilization. Listen to this. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they took the wealth with them. I will say it's astonishing. We know that the Jewish people left wealthy, but now we have an idea as to how wealthy. Shneimar vayinatzlu es Mitzrayim, because the pasuk says they emptied. Yinatzlu means empty. They emptied Egypt. Ravasi amar asua ki mitzuda zu she'ein ba dagon. Ravasi said they made it like a mitzuda is like a trap, Rabbosai, that has no wheat. I guess if you wanted to trap animals, you'd put a little grain in it to trap the animal. So they made it like a trap that had no wheat. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Amar, ki mitzula she'ein ba dagim. No, not mitzuda she'ein ba dagan, but mitzula. Mitzula means a net, like a net that has no fish, right? Meaning totally empty. V'haya munach ad Rechavam. And this wealth resided with the Jewish people until Rechavam. Rechavam was the son of Shlomo HaMelech. And it was during Rechavan's days, remember, where there was a split in the kingdom of Israel. That's when the kingdom of Yisrael and Yehuda split. So what happens? It stayed with Rechavam. Ba Shishak Melech Mitzrayim. So Shishak, who was the king of Egypt, came along. V'natlo me Rechavam. Shishak, so Egypt comes back, and Egypt essentially empties the coffers of the Jewish people, takes all the wealth back. Shnei Mar v'hiba shana chamisha melech Rechavam. Allah Shishak Melech Mitzrayim al Yerushalayim v'yikach es osros beis Hashem ve'es osros beis hamelech. So Shishak comes up and he empties out the treasuries of the Beis Hamikdash and the treasuries of the king. Ba Zerach Melech Kush. Shishak. So what happens? Zerach, the king of Cush, comes along and takes all the wealth from Shishak. Ba Asa v'natluhu mizerach. Asa, both say, who's Asa? Asa is the grandson of Rechavam. The grandson of Rechavam. So the great-grandson of Shlomo Melech, great-great-grandson of David HaMelech, comes back, and what happens? Takes it from Zerach, the king of Cush. Listen to this, but he didn't keep it. V'shigra lahadrimon ben Tavrimon. And he sent the wealth over to Adrimon, the son of Tavrimon. Now, who is that, Rabbi? So take a look at the Rashbam here for just a moment. The Rashbam writes, V'shigro lahadrimon. It's like in the fourth wide line in the Rashbam on the bottom. Melech Aram. Hadrimon ben Tavrimon was the king of Aram. Why did he send the wealth to Aram? La'azor lo al Basha melech Yisrael. Because also at this point in time there was a major war between between essentially the kingdom of Yehuda and the kingdom of Yisrael. And in an episode that never goes well, the kingdom of Yehuda reached out to outside help to help fight against their brothers, to help fight against Yisrael, and he enlisted the help of Melech Aram. So he took all of this wealth and essentially he bought the services of the king of Aram. What happened? Ba'u b'nei Ammon, v'natlo mehadrimon ben Tavrimon. So the Ammon came along and took the wealth from Hadrimon ben Tavrimon. Uba Yehoshaphat. We'll say again, now we have another Melech, another Jewish king. So Yehoshaphat came along, v'natlo mibnei Ammon. And he took it from Ammon. V'hayamunach ad Achaz. And it remained with the Jewish people until the reign of Achaz. King Achaz, another Jewish king. Ba Sancheriv, v'natlo mi Achaz. Sancheriv came along and took it from Achaz. Ba Chizkiah, v'natlo mi Sancheriv. Chizkiah Melech Moshe, who we know again was a great tzaddik, could have been the Mashiach, the Gemara says. Chizkiah Melech comes along and he takes the wealth back from Sancheriv. V'hayamunach ad Tzidkiah. And the wealth remained with the Jewish people until King Tzidkiah. Bo Kastim, the Chaldeans came along. V'natluhu mi Tzidkiah. And they took it from Tzidkiah. Bo'u Parsim, the Persians came along. V'natluhu mi Kasdim, and they took it from the Kasdim. Bo'u Yevanim, the Greeks came along. V'natluhu mi Parsim. I you have to say something. In the world of the world empires, the way this worked is you had the Kasdim, the Chaldeans. Chaldeans are swallowed up by Persia. Persia is swallowed up by Greece. And Greece ultimately is swallowed up by Rome. So when it says they came and they took it, it's not just that they took the wealth, they literally swallowed up these empires. So what happens? The Greeks came and took it from the Persians. And the Romans came and took it from the Greeks. Va'adayin munach biromi. And if you want to know where still all of that original wealth is, it still resides in Rome. Okay, wherever it is, right? It resides in Rome. Rabbi Chana Bar Chanina says, Shalosh matmonios hit min Yosef in Mitzrayim. Actually, so now still talking about this wealth, Yosef, this massive wealth that Yosef amassed, he hid it in almost like 3 different stockpiles in Egypt. Achos niskala leKorach. One stockpile of wealth was revealed to Korach. We'll say that's why we know Korach was exceptionally. The Jews all left with wealth, but we'll see in just a little bit. Korach left with exceptional wealth. So the Gemara attributes that exceptional wealth to the fact that he found some of the hidden wealth of Yosef. When I say, I don't mean, it's not like some of the hidden wealth of Yosef, fine. V'achas niskala la'Antoninos ben Asaviros. So we'll say one of the pockets of wealth, one of the stockpiles was revealed to Antoninos ben Asaviros. So this is Antonius Severus, who is one of the Roman Caesars. So, and again, remember, we learn a lot about Antoninus. Antoninus had a very close relationship with some of the greatest Rabbanim of the time, very interesting figure. And one stockpile of wealth is still hidden and will only be revealed in the Messianic era. And it'll be given to the tzaddikim in the future. So what happens? Because the pasuk says, "Osher shamor leba'alav l'ra'aso." So we'll say the Gemara here quotes the pasuk from Koheles that literally translated it means that there is wealth that is stored away for its owner that has a negative effect, l'ra'aso, for the detriment of the person. Who does that refer to? Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish zu ashro shel Korach. This refers to the wealth of Korach, meaning that the wealth of Korach was his very undoing. Shene'emar, ve'es kala yakum asher b'ragleihem. I will say when the pasuk talks about the fact that what happened to Korach, so the Torah says that the earth opened up, swallowed them up, their homes, their tents. Ve'es kol hayakum asher b'ragleihem. Now, literally, what this means is Yukum sounds like standing, like come, and all of the things that stood at their feet. So the way we normally just interpret this is that it means all of their possessions. But look what the Gemara says. Amar Belazar, zemamono shel adam. Yukum asher b'ragleihem means their money. Why is their money called Yukum asher b'ragleihem? So the Gemara says, Shema amido araglav, because a person's wealth enables or allows him to what? To stand on his feet. To stand on his feet. So interestingly enough, that could be a good thing or that could be a bad thing. On one hand, your wealth could give you confidence to accomplish what you need to accomplish. On the other hand, it could also make one very arrogant and think that they could stand too tall, which is exactly what happened to Korach. So Amar Rab Levi, so both the Gemara just describes Korach's wealth. Amar Rab Levi, Masui shlosh me'os pradim levanos, hayu maftechos shel genazav beis Korach. Korach needed 300 white mules. I guess white mules were also considered to be stronger mules. Needed 300 white mules to carry the keys to his treasure houses. Now, let's say, obviously, this is employing a little bit of hyperbole, right? But the point the Gemara is making over here, 300 mules just to carry the keys, right? Not to carry the wealth, just to carry the keys. And not only that, says the Gemara, Vakulu, aklidi uklifi degalda. And all of these were locks and were keys made of leather. So say, they used to make it out of hardened leather, and that was lighter. So even though, again, they were light locks and light keys, they still needed 300 mules. The point is, Korach was fabulously wealthy. So they both say this is important for us for two reasons. Number one, because the Gemara attributes Korach's incredible wealth to the fact that he discovered one of the hidden pockets of wealth of Yosef. That's number one. And number two, the reason why the Gemara focuses on this is because wealth was the undoing of Korach. Wealth is an interesting thing. It could go one of two ways, which is, again, either it could. We saw before in the previous Gemara that ultimately wealth could be the greatest bracha of Gemilas Chesed. A person could do something positive with it, or God forbid, it could infuse a person with incredible arrogance. And when a person is infused with incredible arrogance, there's no telling the type of destruction that they could ultimately create. Okay, weiter. We'll say this. I almost feel like we're not worthy to do this. This is mamish. That's how good it is. All right, fine, we'll do it. So the Gemara says like this. We'll say, listen to this Gemara, and this is, if you are learning out of your own Gemara, I hope that you have all been underlining these Gemaras when necessary, or at least folding over your pages, because don't lose these Gemaras, because what sometimes happens when you learn is, you see a beautiful Gemara, then what happens? Especially when you're doing Daf Yomi, we move at a somewhat quick pace, and the truth is it gets lost in the sands of the Talmud. Don't make sure to somehow keep a marking on these pages, because this is going to forever change your halal. Amr Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amr Rabbi Yonasan. Otcha ki anisani. Literally translated, I give you thanks because you have afflicted me. Right, an amazing statement. It's a person, the person saying, "Oh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you for my difficulties, not because I'm a sadist, I don't like suffering, but because I recognize that I grow from my suffering." So who said that? Amar David. David HaMelech was the first one to say this. Otcha ki anisani, David HaMelech said. I will say, we know all you need to do is look at Sefer Tehillim, which essentially is a picture of David HaMelech's life. David HaMelech suffered terribly, and in every single way that you could possibly imagine. David HaMelech was rejected by his family as a child. He ultimately had problems in his marriage. He was betrayed by his balabatim, right? By his constituents. He was betrayed by his own son. He suffered through sickness. The only thing David HaMelech didn't have to contend with, really the only thing he didn't have to worry about, was parnasa. And that's a function because being king comes with a pretty good package. So he never had to worry about that. But that was the only area in life where he did not suffer terribly. In every other situation, marriage, family, relationships, health, Everything else he suffered terribly. So, but yet David HaMelech was strong enough to say, Odcha, thank you that you afflicted me because I know that I've only become the person I am because of my difficulties. Evan Masu Abonim Haisal Rosh Pina, literally the stone that was despised by the builders became the cornerstone for the building. Who said this? Was going to blow you away? Amar Yishai. Yishai said this. Yishai, the father of David. Why did Yishai, the father of David, say this? Well, so remember, when Shmuel Navi is told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, go to the sons of Yishai and appoint a king from among the sons of Yishai. And what happens? Yishai lines up all of his sons who are strapping young men. They're valiant soldiers. They're generals in Shaul's army. And David and Shmuel goes through each of them, and God says, not this one, not this one, not this one, not this one. He gets to the end of the line and says, Yishai, do you have any more kids? And Yishai says, yeah, there's one more, but Yishai didn't even think to call in David from the field. He didn't. That's how little he thought of his son. Yeah, there's another one, but he's a shepherd. What do you want with him? Shmuel said, do me a favor, bring him in. And sure enough, we know the story ends. Little David, who everybody wrote off as an eisvarf, that's Latin, right? That's an eisvarf. He's a nothing. He's a nothing. So Yishai says when he sees that David is picked, Evan Masu Habonim, this rock that was despised, and David HaMelech was despised. He was mistreated terribly by his father and by his brothers. Ultimately, that rock that was despised has now become the cornerstone. Me'is Hashem haisazos. This is clearly, because it can only come from God. Amru Echav, that David HaMelech's brothers said when he was selected as king, right? I don't know the intonation. Right? This can only come from God, right? Or this could come from God, or Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Good luck with this one. Whatever they were saying is they recognized that the choosing of their brother was from Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Ze'ayom aso Hashem. This is the day that Hakadosh Baruch Hu has made for great celebration. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel Hanavi said after selecting David HaMelech as king, because there's one thing that Shmuel also knew. He realized that when he selected David HaMelech as king, this was the beginning of a great, great dynasty. Anna Hashem Hoshiana, please HaKadosh Baruch Hu, save me. Amru Echav, the brothers of David HaMelech said, Anna Hashem Hatzlichana. So ultimately what the brothers are saying is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed David to save us. Allowed David to save us from our enemies. Ana Hashem Atzlichana, Chalish Baruch Hu, please make me successful. Amar David. David HaMelech said it. Baruch haba b'shem Hashem. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amar Yishai. Yishai said this. So now also about his son. Beirachnuchem mi beis Hashem. Ultimately you will be blessed in the house of God. Amar Shmuel. El Hashem vayo'er lanu. Excuse me, I should say Kel Hashem vayo'er lanu. So literally HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our God, and He illuminates, He lights up our way. Amru kulan, they all said together. Isru chag ba'avosim al karnas hamizbeach. Literally tie up the chag. Chag means the carbon, with cords at the corner of the mizbeach. If you take a look at the Rashbam says, Isru chag ba'avosim hiviu zvachim ushlamim harbe lismoach umatan down the mizbeach. That's another way of saying let's bring karbanos to celebrate the fact that a new monarchy has just been initiated. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said this. Keli ata vi'odeka. You are my God, and I will live a life that exalts you. Amar David. David HaMelech said that about being chosen as king. He says, Kodesh Baruch Hu, I will make sure that my monarchy is a credit to you. Elokai arom emeka. You are our God, and we will exalt you. Amar Kulan. Everyone said it. So I will say, it's just absolutely amazing. So essentially, again, from Odecha, all the way through Baruch Haba, is the conversation that took place between David, Yishai, his brothers, and Shmuel Hanavi on the day that he was selected as king. Only because I have to finish the daf are we going on. Tanan Hasam. We learned over there, still talking about Hallel. Makom shenagu lichpol, amud beis, yichpol. So we'll say something about Hallel over here. And there are different minhagim in Hallel. In some places, when they recited Hallel, they would repeat certain verses. So we'll say, so the Rashi actually points out over here, lichpol, these are talking about kol Hallel. There are some places that actually used to repeat the entire Hallel. Meaning, we'll say the same way that we say Odecha, that phrase twice. Hodu Hashem Hoshiana twice. There are some places that said multiple parts, sometimes even the entire part of the Hallel. Hallel twice. So if that's the minhag, then that's what you do. Lifshot, yivshot. And if you only say it once, say it once. Levarich acharav yivarich. Some have the minhag to make a bracha at the end of Hallel. Make a bracha. Hakol k'minhag haMedina. Essentially, when it comes to Hallel, you should just follow the regular minhag. Whatever the minhag of your place is, that's how you should recite Hallel. Amar Abaye said, Lo shana el la'acharav. When we said you should follow the minhag of the Medina, that's only talking about the bracha at the end of Hallel. Aval l'fanav, when it comes to making a bracha before Hallel, mitzvah levarech. Everyone agrees that what? There is a mitzvah to make a bracha at the beginning of Hallel. How do we know that? Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Kol mitzvos mevarich alehen over la'asiyasan. Because Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, say that when it comes a general klal, all mitzvos, we make a bracha before the performance of the mitzvah. And Rabbi say again, the truth is, it doesn't matter if that's a biblical mitzvah or a rabbinic mitzvah. Because remember, Hallel, let's say during Rosh Chodesh, is a rabbinic mitzvah. So whether it's rabbinic or biblical, we make brachos over la'asiyasan, prior to the performance of the mitzvah. So the Gemara just says as an aside, my mashma dahai over loshon da'akdumehu. Now I will say, understand just grammatically, if you wanted to make that statement, there's an easy way to make that statement. You could have said, kol mitzvos mevarchin alein. What word would you use? Kodem or lifnei. Right? Kodem asiyasan lifnei. What do you mean over la'asiyasan? So the Gemara says, how do you know that the word over itself means before? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why, because we use this in the context of psukim. So the Gemara says, Amar Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak tichsiv vayoratz achi ma'atz derech hakikar vaya'avor esakushi. Achi ma'atz ran across the plain, and he ya'avor esakushi. He passed before the kushi. What say? This is talking about over here, where after Avshalom was killed, they wanted to deliver to David HaMelech the news that Avshalom was killed. They sent the kushi, and then Achim was a messenger. And then Achimaas realized that what? It would be better for him to deliver this message himself and say he takes flight. He ultimately. So you see over here that what? That the lashon of over means the lashon of going before. So therefore, the Gemara says that's the lashon of over last yosan. I will say you'll see understand that Chazal often like to do this. So they taught multiple lessons in once. What they were doing is they were also reinforcing how to define a certain biblical word. Abai says from here, "V'hu over lifnehem," that he passed before them. Ultimately, talking about Yaakov Avinu's encounter with Esav. So again, you see lashon of over as a lashon of going before. Ikeda amri other simihacha from here. Vayavor malkam lifnehem v'Hashem barasham. Fine. I will say the point over here is what? That you see the lashon of over is a lashon of passing before. Therefore, when Chazal say kol mitzvos mevarchen alein over la'asiyasan. Over means prior to the performance. So we'll say what the Gemara therefore is coming out over here is everyone agrees that you are making a bracha before Hallel. The only suffix is not the only suffix, but the only variable is what? Are you making a bracha after Hallel? And what does that depend on? Depends on minhag Medina. So the Gemara goes weiter. Tanya, Rebbe Kofel Badvarim. Rebbe, when he recited Hallel, used to go ahead and repeat certain lines. Look at the Rashbam. Kofel badvarim ma'at hayakofel. He wouldn't repeat the entire Hallel. Instead, what would he repeat? Mi baruch haba ulemata. So I'll say, what's also amazing about this is, we take for granted this text of Hallel that we use, but it is nothing short than riveting to see the evolution of this. So here, who was the first one to repeat? Because if you look, Baruch haba b'shem Hashem, I will say again, it's all Tehillim. It's all Tehillim. So if you look in the capital of Tehillim, it's not the pshat. The David HaMelech didn't say these statements twice. He said it once. So Rebbe was the one who went ahead and began to repeat each of those statements. Rebbe Kofel Badvarm. Rebbe would repeat certain parts of Hallel, specifically from Baruch haba b'shem Hashem till the end of that paragraph. Rebbe Elazar ben Parta, I will say again, remember, why would you repeat things? So repeating things is a demonstration of incredible endearment of it, right? It's so beautiful, it's so wonderful that you're repeating it, you're reinforcing it. So Rebbe would repeat that section. Rebbe Elazar ben Parta, Mosif Badvarm. Rebbe Elazar ben Parta added on to this. My Mosif, what did he add on? Amra by Mosif lichpol me'odcha lemata. Well, so listen to how amazing this is. So here you have Rebbe would only repeat from Baruch haba b'shem Hashem till the end of Hallel. And what happened? Rebbe Elazar ben Parta added on. He would begin to repeat from where? Odcha Hashem. right? Odcha Hashem. And I will say, obviously, we incorporate both of these practices in our recitation of Hallel. So we repeat from Odcha all the way till the end of the Hallel. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, so it's fine. Darsha Ravira. Ravira said the following. Zimnin Amarle Mishmei Derav. Zimnin Amarle Actually, if you look at the Masuras Hashas, he changes it to Rav Asi. So sometimes he repeated it in the name of Rav Asi. Sometimes he said in the name of Rav Ashi. Ma'id Dichsev. Rav said, listen to how beautiful this is. Again. Ma'id Dichsev. Vayigdal Hayeled Vayigamal. So Rav say the pasuk over here speaks about after the birth. It's actually this week's parsha, right? After the birth of Yitzchak Avinu. So what happens? He was nursed until 3 years, and it was the custom that on the day that they weaned the child, they made a big seuda. So it says, the Torah says, "Vayigda hayalad vayigamal." The child was weaned, and they made a big seuda. So the Gemara says, "My dichsev, vayigda hayalad vayigamal." So the Gemara says, there's a deeper esoteric meaning to this particular pasuk. What's the deeper esoteric meaning? So the Gemara says, in the future, meaning in the Messianic era, God will make a seuda for the righteous. Biyom shiyigamal chasdo lezaro shel Yitzchak. So what happens? Vayigdal hayelad vayigamal. The Gemara darshins. One day the child will grow up. When are they going to experience our ultimate growth? In the Messianic era, in the time when HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes ahead and literally bestows chesed on the kindness on the offspring of Yitzchak. But Yom Sheyigamel, so that you see the drasha, Vayigdal Yeled, Vayigamel. On the day that ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be Gomel Chasadim, will go ahead and bestow chesed on the offspring of Yitzchak, meaning in the messianic redemption, there's going to be a great seuda. And I will say again, this is going to be a seuda to see, because who's going to be sitting at the table? Everybody. Right? When I say everybody, I mean the Avos and Moishe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech. So also this, what's going to happen? So the Suda is going to end. La'achar she'ochlin b'shosin. So we'll say, what's the shayla? The big shayla of the Suda is, who should lead benching? Who should lead benching? Right? We are mechabed. Who? Right? Who? Right? You think the coin should have? Who are we going to give benching to? So listen to this. We'll say this is going to blow your mind. Another underlined Gemara. Nostan Avram Avinu kos shel bracha. So who should they give? Avram Avinu. Right? They will say Avram Avinu is the father of our nation. He should lead benching. Va'omer lahen. He says to them, you know what? No. Eini mevarich. I'm not going to bench. Sheyotza mimeni Yishmael. Because the truth is, as much as I did good by raising Yitzchak, I have another son, Yishmael, and that son has committed terrible evil in this world. So it's not right for me to lead the benching in the messianic Suda. Amar lo Yitzchak, tolu barich. Yitzchak, so I said Yitzchak, you bench. Amar lahen ini mevarich. I'm not going to bench. Sheyotze mimeni Esav, because again, I have a Yaakov, but I also have an Esav, and that Esav also wrought terrible destruction in the world. Amar lo Yaakov, tolu barich. Yaakov says you should bench. Listen to this. Amar lahen ini mevarich. Shenasasi shtei achayos bechayehen. Sha'asida Torah la'osran alai. So Yaakov Avinu said, you know what, I shouldn't bench. You know why? I married 2 sisters. And even though when I married 2 sisters, there was no prohibition, I did something that later on the Torah would prohibit. And when it means 2 living sisters. I was married to 2 sisters at the same time. So Yaakov Avinu said, I did something that the Torah would later on prohibit. Therefore, it's not appropriate that I lead benching. Amar lo Moshe, tolu barich. So he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you bench. Omer lahem, eini mevarich, shelo zachisi likanes li Eretz Yisrael, lo bechayai, velo b'mosai. So say to Moshe Rabbeinu, you lead benching. Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, I'm not fit to lead benching. You know why? I never had the merit to enter into Eretz Yisrael, not during my lifetime, and not in my death. Amazing. Omer lo Yoshua. So Brother Shalom is probably running out of patience at this point in time, right? So what happens? They say to Yoshua, you lead benching. You led the Jewish people in. So what happens? Omer lahen eni mevarich shelo zachisi leben. I was not privileged to leave behind the son, meaning that there was no one who perpetuated ultimately my legacy. Dichsiv Yoshua bin Nun bino Yoshua bino. Yoshua said I didn't leave behind the son. So as such, my name pretty much disappeared. So it's not right for me to go ahead and bench. Omer lo li David. They come to David HaMelech. Tol ubarech. David said, David HaMelech, will you bench? Take the kos and bench. Omer lahem. Listen to what David HaMelech says. Ani avarech. I'll lead benching. Veli no'el avarech. And the truth is, for me, it's appropriate to bench. Shene Emar, because the pasuk says, "Kos Yeshuos Esa uv'Shem Hashem Ekra." David HaMelech says in Tehillim, "I will lift up the cup of salvation, and ultimately I will call the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu." Now, both say David HaMelech absolutely has every right and really is entitled to lead benching at the Messianic Suda. Why? Because who is the Melech HaMashiach? None other than his Einikel, right? The Melech HaMashiach is David HaMelech's grandson. However many greats are in front of that grandson. So David HaMelech says, you know what? I am responsible for this line. And because I'm responsible for this line, it is appropriate for me to lead the benching in this Suda. Amazing. Halavai, we should be zoche to see this from here, Rabbi Yameinu. Says the Mishnah. All right, we're back to we're back to the regular grind over here. So again, we'll still have a little bit more agarata, very little agarata, but we've certainly had our fill. So literally translated means we do after the Pesach we don't do afikoman. So both say afikoman does not seem to be a Hebrew word. So the Gemara says exactly. So the Gemara says my afikoman. So the Gemara says what is afikoman? Right? What does this mean? What does this mean? Ma afikoman. So the Gemara says Amar Rav Shela Ya'akru mechabura lechabura. You know what afikoman means? Afikoman shelo ya'akru mechabura lechabura. You may not move from one group to another group. Now, Rosa, if you look at the Rashbam for just a moment, Amar Rav Shela, Shelo Ya'akru, not Rav Shela, Amar Rav Shelo Ya'akru mechabura lechabura. Rav says afikoman means that you should not move from one group to another group. What does this mean? Rashbam. After they ate the Korban Pesach in one group, lo yelchu bechabura acheres. You should not move to another group. Le'echol lo pas velo shum davar. Not to eat bread or not to eat anything else. Gezera dilma asi lemechal asa Pesach b'shnei makomos. So also remember, you are not permitted to eat the Korban Pesach in more than one location. You have to choose a place, and that's where you have to eat Korban Pesach. There's a concern that if we allow you to eat other things, now technically speaking, if you want to go and eat something else with another chabura, that you can do. But there was a concern that if we allow you to eat other non-Korban Pesach food items with another chabura, what will happen? You'll come to eat your Korban Pesach in that other place as well. So we'll say if you skip down a little bit in the Rashbam points out over here, he says, look at the last line of that Rashbam, Ularav, Hachi Mashmale Afikoman, Afiku Manaichu, Hotziu Kelechem Mikan, Venelech Veneachal B'makom. So we'll say, according to the Rav, what Afikoman means, Afikoman is a contraction of Apik apiku manaichu, literally lift up your utensils, which is what somebody would say if they wanted to go from one group to another. You would take your plate with you. So therefore, according to what the Mishnah is saying is, Ein maftirin achara Pesach afikoman. Even after you finished eating the Korban Pesach, you may not go and eat something else by another chabura. You can't afikoman apik manaichu. You can't take your utensils and go to another chabura. Why? Because we're concerned that if you relocate to another chabura, even though you finished eating your Pesach already, you're just going to have some dessert somewhere else. That what? You may come to actually eat the Korban Pesach in more than one location. And that, of course, would be prohibited. That's Rav. So the Gemara goes weiter. Shmuel says, no, that's not what it means. It means kagon or diloi li Vigozlaya la'aba. What it actually means is, for example, mushrooms or truffles for me and young pigeons for my father. But we'll say, what does this mean? So what Shmuel is saying is, what the Mishnah is prohibiting is dessert. That after you eat the Korban Pesach, there is no dessert. So what would be an example of dessert? So apparently people used to eat mushrooms or truffles for dessert, or some people used to eat pigeons for dessert. A meat dessert. It's not a bad trend to start. Right? So Shmuel says, like, for me it would be mushrooms or truffles. For my father it would be young pigeons. So I will say, look at the Rashbam here for just a moment. So the Rashbam writes, he says, first of all, actually you can look at Rashi. Rashi says, I eat mushrooms or truffles after my suda. Young pigeons for my father. So the lashon afikoman hotziu veheviu minei misika. So I'll say afikoman is same contraction. Apik kaman, bring before us. What would they say? Bring before us. That's the lashon that people would use for dessert. Afikoman is the lashon of dessert. Bring out before us the additional course of dessert. So the Mishnah says, Ein maftirin achar Pesach afikoman. Shmuel means that the Mishnah is teaching me what? There is no dessert after Karban Pesach. Karban Pesach has to be the last thing you eat for the evening. Rav Chanina bar Shila Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kigon Timarim Uklayus ve'egozim. And others say, what's another example of afikoman? Rabbi say again, remember, interesting enough, everybody's agreeing afikoman is not a word to itself. Afikoman is a contraction. The question is, what's the contraction? According to Rav, it's apik manaychu, take your utensils. And therefore, what the Mishnah is saying is, you may not switch groups, you may not move from group to group on the night of Pesach, even though what? Even after you have already finished your Karban Pesach. According to Shmuel, apik kamaychu, or apik minaychu, go ahead and bring out the next course, which is a reference to dessert, and therefore the Mishnah is saying you can't eat dessert on the night of the Seder. And so Rav Chanina, Bar Shila, and Rabbi Yochanan give another example of dessert. Not everybody eats truffles and young pigeons. That sounds like a very chosh of a dessert. But it could also mean, for example, dates, parched grain, nuts, simpler desserts. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan. There's a brayso that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Ein maftirin achar Pesach. You cannot. There's no maftirin achar Pesach. What does that mean? Kigon timarim uklayos ve'egozim. So both say we see over here that clearly the lashon of maftirin afikoman is lashon of dessert, and therefore the brayso is telling you there's no dessert after the Karban Pesach. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Ein maftirin achar matzah afikoman. And both say comes along. Rabbi Yehuda says the name is Shmuel. Then not just Karban Pesach. There is no dessert after matzah. There's no afikoman after matzah. I will say it's interesting. We call that final piece of matzah afikoman because that's our dessert. But it's saying over here is you don't eat any other food after you eat the matzah. Tanan. Ein maftirin achar Pesach afikoman. But yet we learned in the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? There's no afikoman. There's no dessert after Pesach. Achar Pesach hudalo. So it sounds like what? It's only after Karban Pesach that there's no dessert. Aval la'achar matzah maftirin. But it sounds like what? That after you eat your matzah, you can go ahead. Meaning, let's say now we don't have the Pesach yet, so we have matzah. It sounds like maybe we could have dessert after that. So the Gemara says no. Lomi boy kamar. Lomi boy Rabosa is a stylistic statement that sometimes the brayso or the Mishnah will say something that's understood, but we'll say it anyway. What does that mean? Lomi boy achar matzah v'lo nafish tamayhu. It is clear, Abosai, that you can't eat anything after the matzah of the Seder. Why? This is talking about the last matzah, we call afikoman. Why not? Because matzah doesn't have a strong taste. And since we want the matzah, we want the taste of the matzah to be with you the entire night, so therefore, of course, when it comes to matzah, which has a weaker taste, which means if you eat something afterwards, it'll very quickly clean out the taste of the matzah. Of course, you can't eat anything afterwards, because you want the taste to remain. Aval la'achar Pesach, but I might have thought that after the Karban Pesach, nafish tame, which has a very strong taste. The meat has a very strong taste. V'lo matze aburile. And even if you were to eat some dessert after the Karban Pesach, then what? The taste of the Karban would still remain. I might have thought that what? That you can eat dessert. Kamash malon, no. Kamash on both sides, that not only that it's both. You can't eat dessert after matzah, which has a weak taste, and you can't eat dessert after the Karban Pesach itself, which has a stronger taste. The idea is that the Karban Pesach must be the last taste, the last thing you taste that evening, and now the matzah, which we have representing the Karban Pesach, must also be the last thing that you taste that night, and therefore the Mishnah says, Ein maftirin achar Pesach afikoman. And afikoman, according to this approach of Shmuel, means what? Afikoman is another word for dessert. Apikaman, bring out before us this last course, and no last course, no dessert on the night of the Seder. All right, we'll stop over here.